She reported from the front lines of global crises. Now, national security is being reshaped by artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. This is NatSec Tech with veteran anchor and correspondent Jean Meserve.
Welcome to NatSec Tech. In Ukraine and the Middle East, we are seeing the impact of drone warfare. Drones are cheap, they are easy to produce in great numbers, and they are effective. And so countering drones has become a top priority at the Pentagon. Is the Department of War going about this the right way? Well, our guest today has some opinions. Pete Newell is a 32-year Army veteran. He went on to co-found BMNT Consulting, where he is now CEO. Pete, it's great to have you with us.
Well, thanks so much.
I want to ask you first about the lasting impact of drones. Is this something that's of great concern now and is going to subside, or do you think this is going to be an ongoing threat on the battlefield?
I think it will be an ongoing threat. On the battlefield, I think there's also some great things that will be done for humanity using drones. So I talk a lot about technology doesn't care whether you're a friend or an enemy. It's technology. So it gets used for both purposes. There are things that we're learning about the use of drones on the battlefield that, quite frankly, will help farmers in Kansas someday grow better crops. So it's not of all one thing. It is completely ambidextrous in its long-term effects.
It is, however, having an effect, as mentioned, in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And it's been brewing for some time. We've been watching what's been happening in Ukraine. Are you surprised that the Pentagon isn't better prepared to deal with the threat?
Surprised? No. Disappointed? Yes.
Explain.
I was a battalion commander in Iraq in 2004 in significant combat in an urban area when we got the first Ravens, which is the first military version of a UAS system. And in the middle of fight, we threw that thing up. It crossed wires with something else and immediately crashed. And that was the last time we looked at it. In 2013, I was the person who put Switchblade onto the battlefield in Afghanistan. And you go from the time I put the Switchblade on the battlefield in Afghanistan to when the war broke out in Ukraine, and virtually nothing happened in terms of expanding the use of drones or understanding of the technologies around it for 10 years. So we started the conflict in Ukraine with 10-year-old understanding of what was going on. And quite frankly, as you saw on the battlefield, it changed very, very rapidly. And we've been playing catch up ever since.
Is part of the reason we're playing catch up that these drones are constantly being improved? There's innovation upon innovation upon innovation, and we just can't keep up?
That is a true statement. And it's not the first time we've been through this. We went through this with improvised explosive devices on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan, 10, 20 years ago. So it's not the fact that drones are the problem. It is the fact that we have not acknowledged that there are technologies that are going to move so fast we cannot afford not to test them, not to use them, and not to understand them.
Talking about the innovation for just a moment, does information about how to improve drones flow on informal networks that are just much faster than the standard sorts of channels that the military, for instance, would use in the U.S.?
Absolutely. And, we saw that with IEDs in the battlefield is that, the speed at which somebody with absolutely no education can test something, cobble it together and take it out and blow it up a couple of times and then share that. When you see even on the dark web, send a bunch of text to a bunch of friends with instructions on how to build it. It works at the speed of conversation. military procurement system works on a very different clock speed. And I think that's central to the problem we have is, there are technologies that work at a clock speed that is just screeching past where our procurement systems work. And we have got to figure out how to adapt to that speed.
You have actually called drones IEDs that fly. Explain what you mean by that.
Right? It's really a reference to the problem we're facing. And I will say that drones have been turned into IEDs that fly. They have been turned into things that are designed to attack trucks and people and things like that. And they share the exact same characteristics as improvised explosive devices were on the battlefield. I think there are what I would say five things that share five characteristics that are almost identical. The first is that IEDs and the current drones share the same fact that they are cheap, dual use components, which means people can buy commercially all of the components they need to build something that's quite lethal on a battlefield. Second, as you just mentioned, the knowledge of how to use them proliferates faster than we can come up with countermeasures to combat them, which means every time we solve this problem, something changed enough that our solution is no longer valid. The third is that um, modular adaptation happens at almost zero cost. Once you have the basic frame, and people are swapping in new radios, new software, new flight profiles, all kinds of things that really don't have a development cycle. They're doing it as fast as they can possibly do it. The fourth one is that the tactical variation of the use, which means how it's employed, is so diverse that it's impossible to come up with a single solution that fits all those cases, which means we can't mass produce a solution to any of them. We have to keep building these, what I would say, low rate, uh, pinpoint solutions. And finally, we're trying to counter the institutional reflex to just throw technology at a system problem. That, and as I said earlier, this is a clock speed problem, not a technology problem. We simply can't think fast enough to keep up. And that's what we have to really design a change for.
The Pentagon is instituting acquisition reform. Is that going to be enough to change this situation?
In and of itself, acquisition reform is not the complete solution. As both Steve Blank and I have said, what acquisition reform will allow us to do if we're not careful is buy the wrong things faster. What we really need was requirements reform. And I've been saying this for over a dozen years. The acquisition system is not nearly as screwed up as the requirement system is. What we have to do is figure out how to unscrew or build a better requirement system. That system that determines what it is we're going to buy needs to be completely rebuilt um, so that it moves as fast as the clock speed as our protagonists are.
Do you have suggestions on how it should be rebuilt?
We have been building, we say prototypes. One of the things that we have constantly worked on is extracting problems from the battlefield. It's something that I did as the Rapid Equipping Force Director in the Army. I got really good at putting teams on the battlefield to watch what was happening, integrate with the operating forces, and bring their problems rapidly back to us so that we could rapidly prototype potential solutions to put back. Normally, when we put a solution back, it was really a test of our understanding of the problem. We weren't even looking for a solution yet. Then, once we handed something back to people, we very quickly learned what it was should really be doing and how fast we needed to do it to be effective. All of that, it's like, Einstein when he said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I spend the first 59 minutes working on understanding the problem and 1 minute solution. That's the way we need to look at these problems. We need better problem sourcing mechanisms from the battlefield.
Why isn't that happening?
It is happening. Like, and I said, I did it. And I did it prolifically as the ref director.
But
Uh,
in years past, what about
it's
now?
just 20, 20 years. um, we built a program called Hacking for Defense that is a college course that takes problems off the battlefield, gives them to students, and they work on it as if there's their problem, and it's designed to spin on companies. We've been teaching that course now for over 10 years. We have 50 universities a year solving 250 to 300 problems for DoD, oftentimes turning out companies that eventually actually build things. So, I don't say as an experiment, yes, we're doing some of that. It has yet to find, I guess, its place in the system that's equivalent to what JASES was, um, the joint requirements process where we built requirements. So the institutional inertia has pushed back on anything new. So we're not going to extract problems off the battlefield that are going to teach you how to build a replacement for an aircraft carrier. However, we're going to extract problems that tell you how to put things on the aircraft carrier and how people function and things like that. So that in the past, there was no room for a separate but parallel process that moved at a different speed. And we have been experimenting with and improving and building the frameworks to do this. It's starting to take place. Uh, AFRICOM, as a combatant command, for instance, is about to roll out a new joint concept for innovation operations, first one in the military, where it very specifically talks about the lines of effort required to source problems off the battlefield from their apportioned units and charges the staff with actually uh, sorting through them, prioritizing, and then attacking them as if they were a named operation or a named target, just like they would on the battlefield. That's a significant change that will be a bellwether for us being able to move faster. I'm sorry, that's a very long answer.
But a good one. Question. When you talk about this very rapid cycle of innovation, taking stuff from the battlefield, breaking apart, seeing what's happening, and immediately coming up with a countermeasure, isn't that what the Ukrainians are doing? And why
Absolutely.
haven't we taken a lesson from them?
Because we're not in conflict right now. We do this
Well,
very well when
in the
we're at
Middle
war.
East,
Um, and there's a lot going on in the Middle East right now because we're in conflict. We do this well when we're in conflict, and at the end of the conflict, we immediately forget that this is what keeps happening to us, and we revert back to the old system. We need to stop reverting back to the old system and internalize the lessons we've learned. It will be curious to see what happens in the Ukraine if and when that conflict ever starts. And we'll see whether the Ukrainian government and military are able to ensure that this process of speed that they have built up lasts beyond okay, we're not at war, now we need to be efficient rather than effective. We need to be effective every time a conflict starts. And you can't do that from a cold start.
you're a 32-year veteran of the Army. You were involved in innovation yourself when you were in. How much hope do you have that the Pentagon's going to take this to heart and do the things you're talking about?
I am optimistic that and I'm also respectful of how hard this is. Yeah, I see enough leaders, and I'll say this about the generation that came up behind me. My partners in BMNT are on their 40s. They're 20 years younger than me. And they are growing up with a different language. They're growing up with a different doctrine. They're growing up with a better understanding of how this could be done. And they are starting to inculcate that into their patterns of life. So I see that as a major plus amongst the leaders in the Pentagon. I have fantastic conversations with members of Congress who are actually, putting pen to paper and making policy changes that give the Pentagon permission to do what it needs to do. And I'm starting to see signs that leadership in the Pentagon actually wants to do that. Personally, I think when Secretary Hegseth, announced that they were killing off JSIDs, the requirement system, that was the first real opportunity to actually make change happen. Now, the question is whether a requirement system actually dies or not, or they just name it something else and keep doing the same thing. That we've not seen yet.
Are they doing it fast enough?
No, absolutely not. Speed is something you have to learn, and you have to build an organization to do. You can't just walk into an organization that has a 40-year history of how they do acquisitions and say, okay, everybody go 10 times as fast today. You don't have the workforce, you don't have the talent, you don't have the processes, you don't have the intelligence system that drives that. All of that is really, really hard work to build. There are organizations that are making progress. They are doing a lot of workforce development. One is to define what innovation is, and how innovation leads to mission acceleration in context with what the organization's job is. They're starting to promote people who are willing to take risks and are innovative and actually have experience doing things versus letting them leave service or chasing them out of service because there's no job for them. We're starting to see the signs of, as I said, in Africa, on the first actual doctrine being produced that will explain to people what their job in innovation is and what it's not, and actually building the operations for them. So it's progress, but it's long overdue, and it's still happening too slowly.
And what are the consequences of that?
Lots of dead people. Not to say it brutally, but I experienced it firsthand in Afghanistan with the difference in the clock speed between how fast the Taliban experimented with and put different triggering mechanisms and different types of IEDs on the battlefield versus how long it took us to recognize that something had changed and then find a solution and deliver the solution. Their cycle time was 3 months. Ours was 15 months. And the gap between the two cost us almost 5,000 casualties. That's us fighting an untrained army of insurgents. That's not us in a conflict like the Ukrainians and the Russians, or us versus the Iranians. The potential for life loss is extreme if we can't figure out how to move faster.
Got to light a fire under them.
We do, every day.
Pete Newell, 32-year Army veteran who went on to found BMNT, the consulting firm. Thanks so much for joining us today on NetSecTech.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
And thanks to all of you for joining in. A reminder that you can now watch NetSecTech on the SCSP YouTube channel. And as always, you can listen to us on your favorite podcasting platform. Join us again, please. Till then, take care.